At 3:26 a.m., a hallway camera inside a Houston retirement home captures a staff member walking toward room 214. Nothing unusual at first. No alarm, no struggle. Just a quiet door opening, then closing. Inside that room lives 80-year-old widow Ruth Henderson. By morning, her bed is empty. Her wheelchair is still beside it. And the camera that recorded the moment, police almost ignored it until someone noticed what happened 7 minutes later. The assisted living center sat quietly on the west side of Houston, a 3-story brick building, clean hallways, soft lighting, night staff moving slowly through routine checks. For most families, it felt like a safe place, a place where elderly residents could sleep peacefully while someone watched over them. Room 214 belonged to Ruth Henderson, 80 years old, a widow for nearly a decade. Neighbors inside the home described her as calm, polite, and fiercely independent. She loved gospel radio in the mornings, sweet tea in the afternoons, and every evening around 7 p.m., she would call her granddaughter in Dallas. It was a routine she never missed until that morning. At 6:45 a.m., a nursing assistant pushed open the door to room 214 to help Ruth start her day. The room was quiet, too quiet. The bed sheets were slightly folded back, like someone had gotten up slowly during the night, but Ruth wasn't there. Her wheelchair sat beside the bed. Her glasses rested on the nightstand. Her slippers were still neatly placed on the floor. At first, the staff assumed something simple. Maybe she had wandered into another room. Maybe she asked for help at the nurse's desk. It happens sometimes with elderly residents. But within minutes, a strange realization spread through the hallway. No one had seen Ruth Henderson that morning. Staff members checked the dining hall, the common room, even the outdoor courtyard. Nothing, no sign of her. And that's when one supervisor quietly suggested something. Let's check the cameras. The building had security cameras in every hallway. One of them pointed directly toward the door of room 214. What that camera recorded at 3:26 a.m. would soon become the most disturbing part of the entire investigation, because the footage showed someone entering Ruth Henderson's room, someone who was never supposed to be there. Before we go further, a quick note: if you're into realistic crime stories, hidden clues, and investigations that feel disturbingly real, this channel breaks down cases that feel disturbingly real. So if that's your kind of story, consider subscribing, because some of the details in this case only get stranger from here. The security office inside the building was small, just 2 monitors, a desk, and a hard drive storing weeks of hallway footage. The night supervisor pulled up the timeline for 3 a.m. on the camera facing room 214. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The hallway lights glowed softly, empty carpet, closed doors. Residents were asleep. Staff moved through quietly during routine rounds. Then the timestamp rolled forward, 3:26 a.m. A figure entered the frame from the far end of the hallway. A staff member, blue scrubs, ID badge hanging from the chest pocket, walking calmly, no rush, no hesitation, just steady footsteps moving toward Ruth Henderson's door. The supervisor leaned closer to the screen because, according to the shift schedule, no one was assigned to that hallway at that hour. The figure stopped outside room 214. For a moment, they simply stood there, looking at the door, almost like they were listening. Then the hand reached out. The door opened, and the person stepped inside. The camera continued recording. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 3. The door never opened again. Inside the security room, the staff exchanged quiet glances. Something about the timing felt wrong. Routine checks usually lasted less than a minute, but whoever entered room 214 stayed inside for much longer. Then, At 3:33 a.m., the door slowly opened again. The same staff member stepped back into the hallway, but this time, something looked different. Their movements were slower, careful, almost cautious. They looked both directions down the hallway, then walked away from the camera, disappearing around the corner. Inside the security room, the staff paused the footage, rewound it, watched it again, because there was one detail that didn't make sense. When the staff member left the room, Ruth Henderson never appeared behind them, and from that moment forward, no camera in the entire building ever showed her again. By 7:30 a.m., the building manager and two supervisors were inside the small security room, staring at the paused frame on the monitor. The hallway outside room 214 looked perfectly normal. Soft lighting, quiet carpet, closed doors on both sides. Nothing about the scene suggested anything unusual had happened, except the fact that Ruth Henderson was missing. The manager asked the first obvious question: who was that staff member? One of the supervisors leaned closer to the screen. They zoomed in on the ID badge. The image was blurry, but the uniform looked familiar. Blue scrubs, white sneakers, a nurse's aide. But there was a problem. According to the overnight shift schedule, that aide wasn't assigned to the second floor at all. The hallway where Ruth lived was supposed to be monitored by someone else entirely, which meant one of two things. Either the schedule was wrong, or someone had quietly moved through the building where they weren't supposed to be. The team kept watching the footage again and again. At 3:26 a.m., the aide approached the door. At 3:33 a.m., they left. 7 minutes inside the room. 7 minutes that no camera could see. 7 minutes where something happened behind a closed door. The manager felt a knot form in his stomach, because residents inside assisted living facilities don't simply disappear, especially not 80-year-old women who rely on a wheelchair. Then, someone suggested checking another camera, a different hallway angle, one that covered the elevator area just around the corner from Ruth's room. If anyone had left the floor, that camera would have seen it. The footage loaded slowly. The timestamp moved forward. 3:30, 3:31, 3:32. Then, at 3:34 a.m., the screen captured something that made the entire room fall silent. The elevator camera showed a narrow hallway ending in two metal doors. Residents used it during the day. Staff used it all night. The timestamp moved forward slowly. 3:33 a.m. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above the camera. Then, at 3:34 a.m., movement appeared from the right side of the frame. The same staff member from the earlier footage, blue scrubs, white sneakers, walking calmly toward the elevator. But this time, they weren't alone. Something moved beside them. At first, it was hard to tell what it was. The camera angle wasn't perfect. The lighting cast long shadows across the floor. The supervisor leaned closer to the screen. Then someone quietly said, "Pause it." The frame froze. Next to the staff member was a wheelchair. Someone was pushing it, and sitting in that wheelchair was Ruth Henderson, her head tilted slightly forward, her hands resting still in her lap. The lift opened. The aide pushed the wheelchair inside. The camera caught only a brief glimpse before the door slid closed again. No one else entered. No one else left the hallway. Inside the security room, the staff exchanged confused looks, because something about the footage didn't feel right. Residents were sometimes moved during the night, but that required documentation and approval and more than one staff member. The manager quickly checked the overnight logbook. Every resident movement had to be recorded: hospital transport, bathroom assistance, medication rounds, but there was no entry for Ruth Henderson. Nothing. No record of anyone taking her out of her room at 3:26 a.m., which meant the staff member pushing that wheelchair had done it quietly, without reporting it,
and without telling anyone. But the strangest detail appeared seconds later when the elevator camera recorded something else, something investigators would replay dozens of times.
The elevator camera continued recording. The doors had just closed at 3:34 a.m. Inside the small security office, no one spoke. They waited for the next camera feed to appear because every elevator in the building was connected to another camera, the one in the ground floor lobby. If Ruth had been taken downstairs, that camera would show it. The supervisor clicked forward. The timestamp rolled slowly, 3:35 a.m. The elevator doors opened in the lobby. The camera captured the same staff members stepping out first, blue scrubs, white sneakers. Then the wheelchair followed. Ruth Henderson was still sitting in it, her head slightly lowered, her arms resting quietly in her lap. But something about her posture felt strange. Residents who were awake usually looked around. They spoke. They reacted to movement. Ruth didn't move at all. The aide pushed the wheelchair across the quiet lobby floor, past the reception desk, past the locked medication cabinet, straight toward the rear hallway leading to the service exit. That area wasn't meant for residents. Only staff used that door. The security footage showed the aide pressing a keypad beside the door. A quick code. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Cold night air rushed into the hallway. The aide pushed the wheelchair outside. Within seconds, both of them disappeared into the darkness beyond the door. The camera kept recording. The hallway was empty again. The manager leaned back in his chair because the footage had just confirmed something serious. An 80-year-old resident had been taken out of the building at 3:35 a.m. without permission, without paperwork, without anyone else knowing, and the person responsible was still inside the building that very morning.
The room stayed quiet for several seconds after the footage ended. No one inside the security office moved because what they had just seen was no longer a simple mistake. An 80-year-old resident had been taken out of the building in the middle of the night, and no one had reported it. The manager immediately asked the supervisor to pull up the employee roster for the overnight shift. They needed to know exactly who that staff member was. The video was paused again, zoomed in. The ID badge still looked blurry, but the face was clearer this time. One of the nurses in the room recognized it almost instantly. "That's Marcus Hill," she said quietly, a nurse aide who had worked at the facility for almost 2 years. Reliable, quiet, never written up for any serious issue. But there was one problem. Marcus had already clocked out at 3:10 a.m., 16 minutes before the camera showed him entering room 214, which meant technically he was no longer on duty. The manager quickly checked the staff parking log. Marcus's car was still listed in the lot. He hadn't left yet. Within minutes, supervisors began searching the building, hallways, break room, laundry area, even the staff locker room, but Marcus Hill was nowhere inside. Then someone checked the outside cameras. A camera facing the rear parking lot had captured a vehicle pulling away slowly at 3:38 a.m. Dark sedan, headlights on low beam. The license plate wasn't perfectly clear, but the shape of the car matched Marcus's, which meant something deeply troubling. Marcus Hill had left the facility just minutes after pushing Ruth Henderson out that back door, and since 3:35 a.m., no camera, no witness, no phone call had ever shown where the two of them went next. By late morning, the Houston Police Department was already inside the retirement home. 2 detectives stood in the same small security office where staff had first watched the footage. The video of 3:26 a.m. played again on the monitor. The hallway, room 214, Marcus Hill, walking toward the door. The detectives watched every second carefully. No rushing, no forced entry. Marcus simply opened the door like he belonged there. 7 minutes later, he walked out. Then came the elevator footage. Ruth Henderson in the wheelchair, head lowered, body still.
One detective paused the video. "Did anyone talk to Marcus before he left?" he asked. The manager shook his head slowly. No one had noticed anything unusual at the time. Marcus had finished his shift earlier. He was supposed to be gone. Police quickly ran his employee records. 34 years old, certified nurse aide, no criminal history, no complaints from residents. On paper, Marcus Hill looked like a normal employee, but the timeline told a different story. He clocked out at 3:10 a.m., entered Ruth Henderson's room at 3:26 a.m., and drove away at 3:38 a.m. Detectives tried calling his phone, straight to voicemail. They tried again, still nothing. Then dispatch checked something else, Marcus's home address, an apartment complex about 20 minutes from the facility. Officers were sent there immediately, but when they knocked on his apartment door, no one answered. The blinds were closed. The parking space assigned to Marcus Hill was empty, which meant one thing. The last person seen with Ruth Henderson had vanished too, and whatever happened after 3:35 a.m. was now a mystery, stretching far beyond the walls of that quiet Houston retirement home. By early afternoon, the case had already shifted from an internal investigation to a full missing person alert. Houston detectives expanded the timeline. First stop, the parking lot cameras behind the retirement home. The same dark sedan appeared again at 3:38 a.m. It rolled slowly toward the back gate. Marcus Hill was clearly in the driver's seat, but the camera angle couldn't show the passenger side, which meant investigators still couldn't confirm whether Ruth Henderson was inside. The car exited the lot and turned onto a quiet service road. From there, the trail moved to city traffic cameras. One intersection camera caught the sedan at 3:44 a.m., heading west, speed normal. No sudden turns, just another car moving through empty streets. Detectives followed the route camera by camera, but at 3:51 a.m., something strange happened. The sedan passed under a freeway overpass, and after that, it never appeared on another camera again. It was as if the car had simply vanished. No toll readers picked it up. No nearby gas station cameras captured it. Nothing. Investigators began asking a darker question. Why would a nurse aide risk his job and freedom to take an elderly resident out of a facility in the middle of the night? Kidnapping made no sense. Ruth Henderson had no money, no enemies, no reason to be targeted. Then one detective noticed something unusual in the employee file. Marcus Hill had recently requested 3 days off starting that same morning, a last-minute request, approved just 2 days earlier, which meant something unsettling. If Marcus planned this, he also planned not to come back. And somewhere outside Houston that morning, an 80-year-old widow had disappeared with the only man who might know what happened, and detectives were running out of time to find either of them. By the evening, the search for Ruth Henderson spread across Houston. Police circulated Marcus Hill's photo to nearby counties. Patrol units checked highways, rest stops, and hospitals. If the dark sedan appeared anywhere, officers were supposed to report it immediately. But hours passed, and nothing came in. Detectives returned to the retirement home one more time that night. They needed to understand something simple. Why Ruth? The staff described her the same way every time: kind, quiet, no conflicts with anyone. She had lived there almost 2 years and rarely even left the building. Then, a nurse mentioned something small. The night before she disappeared, Ruth had received a phone call. No one knew who it was, but the conversation had lasted nearly 15 minutes, and after that call, Ruth seemed uneasy. Detectives checked the call records. The number was prepaid, unregistered, activated just 3 days earlier, and used only once to call Ruth Henderson, which raised a chilling possibility. Maybe Marcus Hill
didn't choose Ruth randomly. Maybe someone had told him exactly which door to knock on at 3:26 a.m. Days turned into weeks. Marcus Hill was never located, the sedan was never recovered, and Ruth Henderson was never seen again. The only clear record of that night remains the quiet hallway footage, the staff member entering room 214 and 7 minutes later pushing an elderly woman into an elevator that would carry her out of the building for the last time. If you want to explore more cases where small details hide bigger truths, make sure to subscribe, because sometimes the cameras show everything and sometimes they leave behind just enough mystery to haunt an investigation forever.